All right, let's dive right in. Today we're tackling a question I know a lot of you have, like how to launch a podcast without getting lost in the sea of all the how-to guides out there.
Yeah.
We're doing a deep dive into a structured plan today from Siberoloji that breaks it all down into I don't know, like a manageable week-by-week roadmap.
What I think is so interesting about this particular guide is that it kind of acknowledges something kind of crucial. Beginnings can be overwhelming, like they really emphasize not getting bogged down in all the minutia, especially in those initial stages.
Yeah, it's so true. It's like you can get analysis paralysis when there's just so much information out there.
Yeah.
So let's unpack this roadmap a little bit. Week one, like you're raring to go, you've got your microphone in hand, but where do you even begin?
Week one tackles the foundation. And this Siberology guide, they do something that I haven't actually seen very often. They emphasize locking down your podcast niche before you even touch any of the tech stuff.
Oh, that's interesting. Why do you think they prioritize it that way?
I mean, most people probably want to jump right into the fun stuff like recording, right?
Well, sure, but think of it this way. Your niche is like your compass. It's going to guide everything else, your content, your marketing. If you're not crystal clear on who you're speaking to and what you want to offer, well, you risk just wandering aimlessly and you're not going to gain traction. This guide wants you to start strong right from day one. Makes sense. It's like, building a house on a solid foundation
Sure.
versus trying to build it on shifting sand. Now, eventually you do need to address the tech side of things, right?
Yeah.
Like week one tackles that too, and I imagine that can feel really daunting for anyone who's not a tech whiz.
Absolutely, but the guide kind of smartly suggests starting with just the essentials. So a good USB microphone, for example, those can deliver surprisingly high-quality audio without breaking the bank. And when it comes to software, they really emphasize just focusing on the core functions first. You can always explore all the bells and whistles later on.
So yeah, keep it simple. Master those basics and don't get bogged down in like all the latest gadgets. It's all about taking that first step, right? Okay, so you've got your niche, you've got your basic setup. Now what? Week two in this Siberology plan is all about bringing your podcast to life.
And this is where things start to get really exciting. They talk about crafting really compelling content, finding your voice, how to structure your episodes, and really thinking about what you want your listeners to take away from each episode.
One thing I really stress in week two is the importance of a podcast script. And I've got to admit, that surprised me a little bit. I think a lot of people, myself included, might initially think, wait a minute, a script? Isn't that going to make me sound stiff and unnatural?
It's a super common misconception. I've been podcasting for years, and let me tell you, a script is not about like reading word for word. Think of it more as a roadmap. It helps you stay on track, you hit your key points, and it ensures that you are actually providing value to your listeners.
It's like you can still be spontaneous and have fun, but you also don't end up rambling for 20 minutes without actually saying anything of substance.
Precisely. You're free to riff and let the conversation flow naturally, but the script is just like a safety net.
I love that analogy. And speaking of things that surprised me, Cyberlogy actually suggests sourcing royalty-free music in week two. It seems like a small detail, but thinking about it now, having that music lined up early on could really streamline the editing process later.
Absolutely. It's one less thing to worry about when you're knee-deep in editing and trying to create a really nice, polished sound.
So week two is all about transforming those initial ideas into well-structured, engaging content. But it's not just about the words, is it? Siberology also dives into the nitty-gritty of recording and editing. Did you have a favorite takeaway from that section?
Yeah, they talk about editing being like storytelling, and that really resonated with me. You're taking raw material and shaping it into a captivating narrative.
So it's not just about like removing ums and ahs. It's about pacing and emphasis really bringing the content to life.
Exactly. Like a well-placed music clip, it can completely change the mood or emphasize a point. And they even get into the importance of creating show notes, which, let's be honest, those can feel like a chore sometimes.
Okay, but why are show notes so crucial? Convince me.
Think of them as like bonus content for your super fans. It's where you provide links to maybe resources that you mentioned in the episode, maybe add some extra context or behind the scenes tidbits. And most importantly, it gives your listeners a way to connect with you, like on social media or through your website.
Yeah, it's like you're creating a deeper level of engagement.
Yeah,
You're not just sending people out into the void after an episode. You're building a community.
exactly. Which brings us to week three. You've poured your heart into creating amazing content. Now, how do you get it out into the world? This is where things can get a little technical, but Siberology does a great job of breaking it down.
Yeah, this is where a lot of aspiring podcasters hit a wall,
Yeah.
figuring out hosting platforms and RSS feeds and all that jargon.
Right, but it doesn't have to be so intimidating. I actually had a little bit of an aha moment when they explained RSS feeds. You see, before I launched my podcast, I thought I would have to manually upload each episode to a million different platforms.
Oh, I thought the same thing. It felt incredibly daunting.
Well, Siberology cleared that right up. They explained that an RSS feed is essentially like an automated messenger service. You upload your episode to your hosting platform, it generates this feed, and boom, your podcast is automatically distributed to Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, all the major players.
It's like magic. So instead of individually uploading to every single directory, the RSS feed does the heavy lifting for you. That's amazing. What a time saver.
Absolutely. Now, once you've got your distribution sorted, Siberology tackles a topic that I think makes a lot of creators squirm a little bit: promotion.
It's that fine line, between sharing your passion, but also not wanting to feel like you're shouting from the rooftops.
Exactly. The guide really emphasizes that effective podcast promotion. It isn't about bragging. It's about connecting with your target audience authentically. It's about communicating why your podcast is valuable to them.
So instead of saying, my podcast is awesome, listen to it, you might say, have you ever wondered about podcast topic? Well, I explore that and more in my latest episode. You're piquing their curiosity and highlighting why they should care.
Spot on. And I found that some of the best promotion honestly happens organically through genuine connection. Siberology even mentions the power of tapping into podcasting forums and online communities.
Oh, absolutely. In fact, I found this fantastic community online before I even launched my podcast. They offer support, they share tips, people even collaborate on projects together. It's so valuable to connect with people who really understand the journey.
It's like having this built-in support system, which is so crucial when you're navigating the sometimes overwhelming world of podcasting. Okay, so we've covered the foundation, the creative process, the launch, things are rolling. What does week 4 have in store?
Well, week 4 is where Siberology takes a really interesting turn. They go beyond just the basics and dive into the more strategic elements that can help you grow and even potentially monetize your podcast.
Yes, this is where you stop flying blind and start paying attention to data.
Data. It's not the sexiest word, but it holds so many secrets, right? Especially in the podcasting world.
It really does. Week 4 really encourages you to dive into your analytics. Things like download numbers, listener demographics, even when people are tuning in. And they really want you to use that data to make informed decisions about your content, your marketing.
It's like you might think you know what your listeners want, but the data doesn't lie. I know for me, seeing which episodes resonated most with listeners that really helped me understand what I should focus on more.
Exactly. And speaking of understanding your audience, Siberology emphasizes the importance of seeking feedback in week 4. Now, this is where I think things can get a little scary for people, because putting yourself out there, it always comes with the risk of criticism, right?
Oh, absolutely. I remember feeling terrified to ask for feedback when I first started out. But you know what? Some of the most valuable insights I've gained have come from constructive criticism. It helped me refine my style and create a better listening experience overall.
That's the thing about feedback. It's not always about praise. It's about growth. And I think this guide really reminds us that a podcast, it's not a one-way street. It's a conversation. It's engaging with your listeners, taking their thoughts and suggestions on board. And that's really how you build a loyal following.
And isn't that what it's all about? Building a community around your passion.
100%. Now, week 4 also touches on something that I know a lot of podcasters are curious about: monetization. And I appreciate that Siberology takes a very realistic approach here.
Yeah, they don't make any promises of overnight riches, do they?
Not at all. They really emphasize that it's a marathon, not a sprint. It takes time to build a sustainable income stream from your podcast.
And they also don't just focus on the obvious routes like sponsorships, right?
Right. They explore a whole range of options. So advertising, listener donations, merchandise, even offering premium content. And they really encourage podcasters to find what feels most authentic to their brand. Actually, that forum I mentioned earlier, it's been a really amazing resource for learning about different monetization strategies from more experienced podcasters.
It's like having a built-in network of mentors.
Yeah.
Okay, so to wrap up this deep dive, Siberology has given us a really comprehensive week-by-week roadmap for launching a successful podcast. What do you think is the most valuable takeaway for our listeners?
For me, it's the emphasis on intentionality. This guide really encourages you to approach podcasting with a clear vision, a well-defined niche, and like a deep understanding of who your audience is.
It's not just about hitting record and hoping for the best. It's about building something sustainable, something meaningful. Now, before we go, I want to leave our listeners with a thought-provoking question from the guide that really stuck with me. Think about your podcast niche. Who is an unexpected guest you could invite that would make your show stand out from the crowd?
Someone who could challenge your assumptions, someone who could offer a really fresh perspective and leave your audience hungry for more. Brainstorming those unique collaborations, it's definitely time well spent.
Absolutely. And on that note, we'll wrap up this deep dive into the world of podcasting. Remember, your voice deserves to be heard, and with a little planning and a lot of passion, you can make your podcast dreams a reality. Thanks for joining us, and until next time, happy listening.